I thought he was dead. For 30 years, I lived with that belief. I buried him in my memory, sealed that coffin shut, and tried to move on. But then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate hits on my front door. I froze, coffee cup in hand, Sunday morning, the dog barking like hell. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not today. Not ever. I opened the door. And there he was. Ethan. Same eyes. Same smirk. A little older, a little grayer. But alive. I dropped the cup. It shattered like my sense of reality. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said. That familiar voice hitting me like a freight train full of memories. I didn't answer. Couldn't. My throat closed. My mind raced back to 1995, the last time I ever saw him. The last time before he disappeared. Gone. Just like that. No calls. No letters. Not even a damn postcard. We were best friends. Closer than brothers. And then one day, poof. Vanished. And now he was here. Standing in front of me like it was nothing. "You gonna let me in, or?" he asked, glancing around like he hadn't been gone for 3 decades. I stepped aside. My hands were shaking. He walked in like no time had passed. Like 30 years hadn't torn a hole through my soul. I wanted to scream, punch him, hug him. Instead, I just closed the door. "Coffee?" I asked like a damn idiot. He chuckled. "If you're still making that motor oil you used to call coffee, hell yes." I stared at him. "Where the hell have you been, Ethan?" His face changed. The smirk faded. And then he said something I'll never forget. "I didn't just leave, Mike. I ran. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, arms crossed, eyes locked on him like he was some kind of wild animal that wandered into my house." He looked down for a moment, rubbed the back of his neck. An old nervous habit I hadn't seen in decades. It was like muscle memory kicking in. "I ran because I had to," he said again, softer this time, like repeating it would somehow make it make sense. But it didn't. Not to me. Not after what he did. We grew up in Phoenix on the same damn street. We went to school together, worked our first job together at Miller's auto shop, even dated girls from the same friend group. We were inseparable. People used to call us the twins, not because we looked alike, but because we moved like one. There wasn't a moment in my teenage years or my 20s that didn't have Ethan in it. Until one night, just like that, he disappeared. No warning. No goodbye. Just gone. I remember calling his number 20, maybe 30 times. Went to his apartment, it was empty. Like he never existed. And now this man, this ghost from my past, was sitting on my couch like it was 1994 again. Telling me he had to run? That wasn't good enough. Had to. I finally said, my voice like gravel. "You think that explains anything? You vanished, Ethan. People thought you were dead." I thought. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. "I thought something happened to you. I grieved you. For years." Ethan closed his eyes and leaned back into the couch like the weight of those words physically hit him. For a moment, I thought I saw a tear gather in the corner of his eye, but he blinked it away before it could fall. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "But if I'd stayed, Mike, you'd be dead. Or worse." "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked, stepping closer. "What does that mean?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not when we were kids, not when we were dumb 20-somethings trying to make a life. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear. "There were things you didn't know," he said. "Things I couldn't tell you back then. But I'm here now because I need to. And because they're still watching." For a second, my heart stopped. "They?" I sat down across from him. My hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from shock. It was something else. Something cold. Something dangerous. And I had a terrible, terrible feeling I was about to find out exactly what he'd been running from. I stared at him, barely blinking. My breath caught halfway in my chest. That word, watching, wasn't one you just toss around after 30 years of silence. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. It was clinical, specific. Like he wasn't telling me a story, he was warning me. Ethan sat there, hunched forward now, his elbows on his knees, fingers interlocked tight like a man in confession. There was sweat beading at his temple even though the house wasn't warm. "Mike," he said, his voice low but steady. "Have you ever heard of a man named Carter Vale?" The moment that name left his mouth, something ancient and poisonous twisted inside my gut. I hadn't heard that name in over 3 decades. Not since the summer of '94, when Ethan and I stumbled into something we never should have been part of. Back then, Carter Vale was just a myth. A whispered name passed around by guys who hung out behind the auto shop or in back alley bars, stories about someone with money, power, and blood on his hands. People said he ran an underground syndicate stretching from Vegas to New Mexico. Human trafficking, drug running, political blackmail, you name it. But no one ever proved anything. And no one ever said his name twice. I remember one night in particular, late July, right before Ethan disappeared, we were out drinking behind the gas station after hours. Just the two of us. Ethan was jittery, kept checking over his shoulder. I thought it was the beer or maybe the heat. But he said something weird. Something I'd forgotten until now. "If I ever vanish, Mike, remember the name Carter Vale. And don't come looking." And I hadn't. I buried it just like I buried him. Until now. "You told me once," I said slowly, the words almost painful to speak. "That name. That damn name. And now you're saying he's still around." "He never left," Ethan said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "But he went deeper underground. Smarter. Cleaner. But just as lethal. And I worked for him, Mike. I got in too deep." The room went silent, thick with tension. The walls felt like they were closing in. My old friend, my brother, the guy I trusted more than anyone on this planet, had been living a double life? Working for a criminal godfather I thought was a ghost story? "Why didn't you tell me back then?" I asked, my voice hoarse, suddenly unsure of everything I ever knew. "We could have done something. Gone to the cops. Left town." Ethan shook his head, looking older than ever. "You don't understand. You don't just leave Carter Vale. You survive him. And only if you run far enough, fast enough, and make damn sure no one knows where you went." I felt sick. Everything, the silence, the missing years, the nightmares I had for decades, it all made sense now. But it also meant something far worse. If Carter Vale was still alive and Ethan just showed up at my house, then someone might be coming for both of us next. I stood up. I didn't mean to, didn't plan it, but my body moved before my brain could stop it. Pacing. 1, 2, 3 steps across the living room. My hand ran through my hair, slow and shaky, and I could feel my scalp damp with sweat. I hadn't felt fear like this since my father's heart attack, that cold realization that something massive, irreversible was unfolding and you were too small, too late, to stop it. Ethan sat motionless on the couch, eyes following me, his expression hollow. That alone unnerved me. The Ethan I knew never sat still. He was a fidgeter, a foot tapper, a paces behind the gas station kind of guy. But now he was frozen, like if he moved, the devil might find him again. "You think they followed you here?" I asked finally, voice tight. "To me? You think you were clean for 30 years and then just decided to knock on my door like it was 1993 again and they wouldn't notice?" "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They're killing the old crew. One by one. Cleaning house. I've been getting messages. Dead birds left in my car. My burner phone lit up with pictures of people I used to know. Friends. Gone. All in the last 6 months. They're scrubbing the past, Mike. Anyone who ever touched Carter's network is a loose end." I froze mid-step. "Jesus Christ. And I couldn't let them find you on their own," he continued. "Because your name's on the list too." My knees almost buckled. "What list?" "I never worked for him, Ethan." "You did." "Not me." "I know," he said. "But I told them your name. Once. Just once. Back when things were spiraling." I panicked. I was trying to get out, trying to cut a deal with someone inside the operation. They asked for leverage and I gave them you. His voice broke on that last word and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in a long, long time, shame. The kind that rots you from the inside out. I sat back down slowly, the couch creaking beneath me like it was absorbing the weight of everything we weren't saying. My heart was pounding. My throat dry. I wanted to yell, throw something, punch a wall. I wanted to rage like the betrayed friend I was. But none of that would matter now. Because if what he was saying was true, it wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. "I'm sorry, Mike," Ethan whispered. "I was young. Stupid. Scared. I thought if I disappeared, it would be enough. That they'd forget you. That I'd take it all with me. But now..." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and soft like it had been handled 100 times too many. He slid it across the coffee table toward me. I hesitated, then picked it up and unfolded it slowly. There were 17 names on the list. 6 were already crossed out in red. The 7th one was mine, and someone had drawn a small black X next to it, fresh ink, still sharp. They knew. They knew where I was. I sat there with that piece of paper trembling in my hands, the weight of it heavier than any weapon I'd ever held. It was just a list. A simple, ordinary list. Names printed in tight block letters, some of them I recognized vaguely like shadows from a past I barely remembered. Others meant nothing to me. But it didn't matter. Because mine was there. Clear. Undeniable. Michael D. Waters. No middle initial. No address. Just the name. And yet someone somewhere had already found enough to mark it with an X. My fingers gripped the edge of the paper so hard I thought it might rip. I wanted it to rip. I wanted this to be fiction. But the truth was inked in permanent black, and there was no taking it back. You don't get it, do you? I said, looking up at Ethan, my voice low, shaking with barely controlled rage. You handed me a death sentence 30 years ago, and you didn't even warn me. He looked like a man about to break. I thought it was over. I thought they'd forget you. I thought leaving you behind was the best way to keep you safe. You thought. I barked, standing again, the paper crumpling in my hand. Jesus, Ethan? You ran like a coward, and I spent 3 decades thinking you were dead. I blamed myself. I blamed me. And now I find out you were alive, hiding, and dragging my name through hell with you. I was 23, he shouted back suddenly, standing now too, his voice cracking under the weight of his own guilt. I was 23, Mike, and they were going to kill me. They had pictures, leverage, people on the inside. I made a call. A stupid, desperate call. And then I ran. I didn't even know if they kept that list. I didn't know they still had you marked. There was a long, bitter silence between us. The kind that doesn't just sit in the air, it poisons it. We stared at each other, 2 old men bound by old mistakes, and all I could think was, this wasn't supposed to be how it ended. We were supposed to grow old in the same town, go fishing once a year, joke about our wives or our aching backs. Not this. Ethan sank back into the couch, hands over his face. I've been watching my back for 30 years. Living under fake names. Cash-only jobs. No social. No records. But something's changed, Mike. They're not just cleaning up. They're planning something. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? He looked up. His face was pale, drawn. Like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. I intercepted a message. From one of their internal comms. I still have some contacts. People on the edge of the network. They said something's going down in Nevada next month. Something big. Carter Vale's son, Alex, is taking over. He's worse than his father. Smarter. Colder. And before he consolidates power, he wants every ghost buried. That's when it clicked. Why Ethan was here. Why he risked everything to come back. This wasn't just a visit. It wasn't nostalgia. It was a warning. A desperate attempt to make things right before the fuse ran out. And suddenly, I understood the finality in his eyes. Because Ethan didn't come back just to warn me. He came back to die with me if he had to. The air in the room had changed. Thicker. Charged. It was the kind of stillness that comes before a storm, not the kind you watch through a window with a cup of tea, but the kind that hits you dead in the chest and rips your roof clean off. I dropped into the armchair across from Ethan, my limbs heavy, my mind spinning like a roulette wheel with nothing but zeros. He just sat there, slouched, eyes hollow. He looked older than I remembered, not just in the gray at his temples or the lines around his eyes, but in his bones, like life had sanded him down year by year until there was barely anything left to grind. I remembered how invincible we used to feel, him especially. The fastest guy on the football field. The one who laughed in the face of fights. And now he looked like he couldn't outrun a shadow. You said you intercepted a message, I finally said, quieter this time. How? He glanced at me, unsure. You really want to know? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, the list still crumpled in my hand. Try me. Ethan sighed and reached into his jacket again, slower this time, deliberate. He pulled out a battered old flip phone, the kind you'd expect to find buried in a glove box next to expired insurance papers. He slid it across the table. It looked unremarkable, just a scratched-up burner. But when I picked it up and opened it, there was a note taped inside the battery cover. Listen at 3:14 a.m. Channel 42.1 encrypted. That's shortwave, I muttered, looking up. Old tech. Exactly, Ethan said. Because no one uses it anymore. Which makes it perfect for passing untraceable instructions. Vale's crew sends coded dispatches over ghost frequencies buried in white noise. Took me years to find one. Longer to crack the pattern. I blinked, absorbing that. So what did you hear? He hesitated, rubbing his hands together like he was warming them by a fire only he could feel. Keywords. Phrases. Code numbers. But one phrase came up more than once. No roots, no echoes. That's what they keep repeating. I didn't get it at first. But I do now. I waited, the silence stretching. It means erasing everything, he said finally. Every connection. Every name. Every person that ever brushed up against their world. No roots, no one to trace them back to where they came from. No echoes, no one to remember them after they're gone. My stomach turned. He wasn't just being hunted. We both were. So what now? I asked, my voice quieter than I expected. We run. Ethan shook his head. I've been running for 30 years. Doesn't work. Sooner or later, they find you. The only chance we have now is to go dark. Completely. One last safe house. It's remote. Off-grid. Not even under my name. Where? Outside Ely, Nevada. Old hunting cabin. Belonged to a guy I helped disappear years ago. He owed me. Paid in land instead of cash. I rubbed my face, the stress crawling under my skin. You're saying we hole up in the desert and wait? I'm saying we disappear for real this time, he replied. And while we're there, we figure out what this handover in Nevada actually is. If we can get ahead of it, we might have a shot. It sounded insane. Like something out of a B-movie script. 2 old friends, one of them half a ghost already, hiding in the desert from the son of a mobster we thought was dead. But then I looked down at the list again. 17 names. And mine was number 7. I didn't believe in fate, but I did believe in unfinished business. So I nodded slowly. We leave at dawn. We left the next morning before the sun had even threatened to rise. The street was still asleep, soaked in that eerie blue darkness that only exists for a few precious moments between night and day, like the world holding its breath. Ethan pulled up in a beat-up, dust-covered Chevy Suburban that looked like it had driven straight out of a junkyard in 1987 and never looked back. No plates. Cracked windshield. A faint smell of gasoline and sweat inside. I didn't ask where he got it. I didn't want to know. The less I knew now, the better. The moment I stepped into that passenger seat, I felt it, the old Mike Waters, the one who paid taxes and watched baseball and argued about potholes at town meetings, he died quietly in that driveway. And someone else, someone from a much darker past, took his place again. We didn't talk much the first few hours. Just the hum of tires and the occasional pop of gravel under the wheels. The interstate unrolled ahead of us like a gray, cracked ribbon, and the desert slowly swallowed us whole. We passed empty gas stations, rusting billboards, long stretches of nothing but sky and scrub. I stared out the window, watching the land shift, watching the ghosts of my old life drift further and further behind us in the mirror. I kept thinking about that list. About the names that were already crossed out. I remembered a guy named Felix Moreno worked with Ethan for a few summers at the body shop. Always wore sunglasses indoors, talked with a lazy southern drawl. He was number 2 on the list. I Googled him last year out of curiosity. His obituary said accidental house fire. But now I knew better. You trust this cabin? I asked, eventually breaking the silence. My voice sounded different, hoarse, like it had aged 10 years in a day. Ethan nodded without looking at me. Last place anyone would think to look. I helped the guy fake his death in '99. Gave him a new life in Argentina. He left the keys and instructions in a lockbox. Said if I ever needed to vanish, it was mine. I tried to picture it. A place off the grid, buried in trees and silence. No cell towers. No cameras. No neighbors. It felt more like a grave than a safe house. But maybe that was the point. Around noon, we stopped at a roadside diner in a town with no name, just a crooked, open sign and an old man smoking out front like he'd been waiting for the world to end since '76. Ethan ordered black coffee. I just asked for water. Neither of us touched our food. We sat there in that cracked leather booth like 2 men on their way to a firing squad. I watched every person who walked in. Watched the waitress's eyes. The trucker who kept glancing at his phone. A kid in a hoodie who never took off his sunglasses. Paranoia wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a way of breathing. When we got back in the truck, Ethan didn't start it right away. He just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring through the windshield like he could see something coming down the road long before it arrived. You think they're following? I asked. He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, not yet. But they will. The second they realize I broke pattern. That I stopped running. That scared me more than anything. Because if Ethan was done running, then the only thing left to do was stand and fight. We crossed into Nevada under a sky smeared with smoke-colored clouds and a sun that burned too hot for spring. The desert stretched around us, endless and godless, like the kind of place where names were forgotten and bodies vanished without stories. The GPS was off. Phones were dead, batteries ripped out, and SIM cards crushed beneath Ethan's boot back in Arizona. We didn't speak anymore unless it was necessary. Our words had become currency now, something to be rationed, guarded, never wasted. There was something sacred about the silence between us. It wasn't peace. It was the silence of survivors. Of men who knew they were walking toward the edge of something that might not let them walk back. The turnoff came at mile marker 114, a dirt path so narrow and overgrown it looked like it had been swallowed whole by time. Ethan took it without hesitation, the Suburban growling as we jostled down the uneven trail. I held onto the door handle, knuckles white, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of motion. Nothing. Just sand, rocks, and brush. Eventually, the road curved into a narrow ravine, walls of redstone rising up around us like jaws closing in. My gut twisted. This was the kind of place you didn't leave unless someone let you. But then, at the end of that long stone throat, the cabin emerged. It was smaller than I expected, just a squat wooden shell tucked between two sandstone cliffs weathered by sun and time. One window was boarded. The porch sagged. The front door looked like it had been kicked in and repaired more than once. But it was real. Tangible. A place outside the map. Ethan killed the engine and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a month. "We're here," he said, and I swear his voice cracked like it had to climb over a mountain of regret to get out. Inside, the air smelled like dust and rot and old wood, the kind of smell that wraps around your bones and doesn't let go. We swept the place fast, instinct kicking in. One room, a kitchenette, a moldy bathroom. There was a basement too, half-dug and barely lit. A cot in the corner, stacks of canned food, a rusted toolbox, and a landline wired into nothing. Whoever this guy was, the one Ethan helped disappear, he planned for the end. And maybe hope he wouldn't have to face it. That night, we sat in silence on the porch, staring out into the black desert. No city lights. No noise. Just the wind and the occasional howl of something too far away to name. I kept that damn list folded in my back pocket, like a letter from death I couldn't unread. My name still had that black X. Still fresh. Still waiting. Ethan broke the silence with a whisper. "I keep thinking about your brother. The night he almost found us at the junkyard. Remember?" I nodded. "You told him we were working late. He believed you." "I lied to him," Ethan said, eyes fixed on the stars. "We were meeting Carter's guys. I had cash in my trunk. And I remember thinking, if your brother looked 1 second longer, we were done." He paused, then added, "I think about that moment more than anything else in my life. That was the fork. That was where it all split." I didn't say anything. What was there to say? We were past regret. Now we were just counting shadows. And we didn't know how many were left. The next morning came like a slap, hard, dry, without warning. The desert sun rose over the cliffs and punched straight through the dusty cabin windows, turning everything inside gold and unforgiving. I hadn't slept. Not really. I must have dozed off for maybe an hour, but every creak in the wood, every gust of wind outside pulled me back with my heart racing. I wasn't used to this. Living like prey. I was a man who paid bills on time, who mowed his lawn on Sundays, who cursed at potholes and watched crime shows like entertainment, never thinking I'd be in one. But now? Now I was sleeping next to a loaded shotgun, sharing a room with a man I thought was dead, hiding from ghosts with real guns and names they were crossing out one by one. Ethan was already awake when I came out of the back room. He sat at the kitchen table, shirtless, cleaning an old revolver with the focus of a surgeon. He didn't look up. "Something's off," he said quietly, almost to himself. I grabbed a glass, poured water from the jug we hauled in from the last stop, and asked, "What do you mean?" "I checked the ridge last night," he said. "Found tire tracks. Not from us." I froze, the glass halfway to my mouth. "How fresh?" He finally looked up. His eyes were sharp again. That old Ethan. The one who used to get into fights for fun and outrun cops just to prove he could. Could have been yesterday. Could have been 6 hours ago. Hard to tell. But someone was up there. Watching. It hit me then. We weren't hiding. We were already being hunted. Could it be locals? I asked, even though I knew damn well the answer. He shook his head. No one comes out here. No gas stations for 40 miles. No hiking trails. No cell towers. Nothing. The only people who come out here come for a reason. I swallowed the water fast, but it did nothing to kill the dryness in my throat. "What do we do?" I asked. Ethan put the revolver down, leaned forward, and unrolled a map across the table. It was stained, creased, and marked in several places with red pen, circles, XS, and arrows. "There's an old mine shaft 2 clicks from here. If we need to ditch the cabin, it's our fallback. Hard to spot. No drone could see it under full sun. Jesus, I muttered, rubbing my face. This is real. This is actually real? It's been real for 30 years, he said. You just didn't know it. The rest of the day passed slow and heavy. We didn't go outside unless we had to. Ate in silence. Took turns sleeping in short shifts. Ethan had me running drills, loading weapons, spotting tail lights on ridges, recognizing the sound of drone wings. I felt ridiculous at first, like I was role-playing some second-rate action movie. But somewhere deep down I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was preparation. At dusk, Ethan lit a single lantern and killed all other light. They move at night, he said, when the heat drops and the shadows stretch longer. And sure enough, at 1:37 a.m. I saw it. A flicker. Way out on the ridge. Small. Subtle. But unmistakable. A flashlight signal. Short. Short. Long. Morse code. They're here. We killed the lantern. No words. No hesitation. Just silence and movement, like soldiers, like animals sensing the snap of a twig just beyond the tree line. Ethan was already on his feet, grabbing the duffel with the weapons and the emergency water. He slid the revolver into his waistband and tossed me the shotgun. My hands were sweating, my heart thundering, but the old instincts kicked in faster than I thought possible. 30 years of forgetting how to be afraid undone in a single heartbeat. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. That was the thing about a friendship like ours, it was wired into muscle memory. I knew how Ethan moved before he did. He knew where I'd hide before I even thought to. He motioned toward the back door, not the main one, the smaller exit that led into the brush and around the side of the canyon. The idea was simple: get out, get low, get to the mine shaft. Hide. Regroup. Figure out if we were being hunted or just watched. But deep down I already knew. The way the light had flickered on the ridge, it wasn't a scout. It was a signal. Someone letting the others know. The hammer was coming down. And we had maybe 5 minutes before it hit. I followed Ethan out the back, ducking low, shotgun tight against my chest. The night was dead silent. No wind. No insects. Just the crunch of our boots on dry earth and the pounding of blood in my ears. We stayed close to the canyon wall, the shadows cloaking us like we belonged there. Behind us, the cabin shrank into the black, a dark shape under a darker sky. I kept waiting for a sound, a voice, a gunshot, the pop of glass breaking. But there was nothing. Just the dread. The unbearable pressure of knowing something was about to happen and not knowing when. We reached the halfway mark to the mine when Ethan stopped cold. He crouched, lifted a hand, and pointed with 2 fingers toward a bluff just above us. At first, I didn't see anything, just rocks and brush. But then, a flash. Metallic. The edge of something unnatural. A scope. Maybe a lens. Sniper, I mouthed. He nodded once. I dropped flat against the dirt, heart slamming, ball rising. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This wasn't a bad dream. Someone had us in their sights. Someone had waited for us to make a move. And they weren't alone. 3 shapes emerged from the edge of the canyon, fast, silent, military in posture. All black. No markings. Not law enforcement. Not amateurs. Professionals. The kind of men who didn't carry badges. The kind who didn't take prisoners. Ethan tapped my shoulder and gestured with 2 fingers split. I knew the drill. I went left toward the thicker rocks. He circled right. I moved like I hadn't in years, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. I could hear them moving now, slow, sweeping patterns like a search team. Not looking for signs. Looking to finish the job. I slid into a crevice between 2 massive boulders, just wide enough to hold my body and the shotgun. My back pressed to stone, I watched as one of the shapes came closer. 20 feet. 15. I could hear his breathing now, controlled, steady. This man wasn't nervous. This was routine. This was work. Then, without warning, a shout. Sharp. Brief. Not English. Followed by a gunshot. Not mine. Not Ethan's. And suddenly the canyon exploded in chaos. The echo of that first gunshot ripped through the canyon like thunder, bouncing off the red rock walls and fracturing the silence into 1,000 sharp pieces. For a split second, everything froze. Even the night seemed to hold its breath, stunned by the violence it had just witnessed. Then came the screaming. Muffled. Foreign. One of them was hit, not dead, but down, his voice high and broken with pain. It wasn't Ethan. I would have known. I would have felt it. The connection we had, forged in sweat, blood, and the stupid invincibility of youth, didn't need confirmation. I knew he was still alive out there and fighting. I didn't move from my crevice. Not yet. I watched the others scatter, the smooth, synchronized formation breaking into chaos. They weren't panicking, these weren't rookies, but they were recalibrating. Someone had caught them off guard. Ethan must have doubled back, found a perch above the canyon, and taken the shot. Smart. Risky as hell, but smart. He was always the one with the balls to pull a stunt like that. Me, I was the anchor. The guy who stayed low, who cleaned up the mess. But now we didn't have that luxury. This wasn't a job. This wasn't a score. This was survival. I peeked over the edge of the rock just enough to catch movement. One of the remaining two had dropped to his knee, rifle aimed toward where the shot had come from. The other was advancing fast, cutting the canyon in tight zigzag patterns, trying to flank whoever fired. I knew that pattern. I'd seen it before, not in person, but in old Marine footage back when I used to waste hours watching tactical breakdowns online. These men were trained. Efficient. No wasted movement. That meant no hesitation if they found us. I steadied the shotgun. Waited. My target was moving fast, unaware of my position. If he kept coming another 5 feet, I'd have a clear shot. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. I felt it in my chest like a drumline, every beat reminding me that this was real. That this wasn't some slow burn vendetta anymore, this was now. This was death, sharp and breathing down my neck. He passed the rock. I stood, pivoted, and fired. The blast was deafening in the canyon, a savage roar that ripped through the still air and punched the man backward like he'd been hit by a truck. He dropped instantly, his body crumpling into the dirt with a sickening, final kind of thud. No screams. No twitching. Just silence. I dropped back into cover, reloading with trembling fingers. The echo of the shot still rang in my ears, but I didn't have time to process it. Not emotionally. Not mentally. I just knew the math had changed: 1 down, 1 wounded, 1 still standing. And then, from across the canyon, Ethan's voice, low and urgent, cutting through the dark. Mike. Move. Another shot. But this one wasn't aimed at me. This one came from behind. And that's when I realized. There were more than 3. The shot tore into the stone inches from my head, shattering the edge of the boulder and spraying my face with dust and tiny shards. I hit the ground hard, heart hammering, ears ringing, blood roaring in my skull like a siren. My instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The canyon had become a kill zone. And they had the high ground. Somehow, somewhere behind us, more of them had moved in. Maybe they'd followed us for longer than we realized. Maybe they had a damn satellite. Or maybe Carter Vale's people were just that good. Either way, we were pinned and the walls were closing fast. I crawled through the dirt, keeping low, breath coming fast and shallow. The taste of grit was thick on my tongue. My knees screamed with every jagged rock I slid across, but I didn't stop. I could hear them now, boots against stone, short commands whispered in some clipped dialect, coordinated like wolves herding deer. But I wasn't deer. Not anymore. That man, the one who worked 9 to 5, who paid property tax, who waved at neighbors, he was gone. Dead and buried somewhere back on that porch. I was something else now. Something Carter Vale's boys didn't account for. A flash to my right. Movement, Ethan climbing down the far side of the canyon, using shadows and outcroppings like he was born to it. He had a rifle slung tight and his jaw set like stone. I couldn't hear his voice, but I saw him mouth the word 3. Then he held up a single finger and pointed behind me. I turned slowly, pressing my back against a slab of rock. And there he was. Not more than 10 feet away. Another one of them. Dressed in desert camo, face wrapped, eyes hidden behind dark tactical lenses. He moved like a ghost, silent and swift, weapon drawn and pointed straight at my chest. I don't know if it was instinct, luck, or pure, blind panic, but I moved first. I rolled to my side, pulling the shotgun up as I hit the dirt and fired from my hip. The shot caught him low in the ribs and he dropped instantly, his rifle spinning from his hands, blood soaking the dust in wide, black circles. I scrambled to my knees, grabbed his weapon, and crawled away from the widening pool beneath him. There was no time to feel it. No time to breathe. The sound of gunfire echoed through the canyon, now rapid, focused, a gunfight in full swing. I ducked behind a rock shelf, clutching the dead man's rifle, heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Above me, I could see the shadows of the others moving, repositioning. Ethan was drawing their fire, giving me time. I knew what he was doing. He always did this, took the heat so I could think. He knew I could build a plan in seconds if I had just a little room to breathe. And he gave it to me. So I built one. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flare, one of 2 we had packed for emergency signaling. I bit the cap off, struck the trigger, and rolled it out toward the far end of the canyon. It lit up the rocks in brilliant red, casting sharp shadows and lighting the entire ridge like hell itself had opened. They turned toward it. Every single one of them. And in that moment, in that perfect second of distraction, Ethan rose up from behind a ridge like a wraith and opened fire. Precise. Surgical. Furious. One went down instantly, a shot straight through the neck. Another dropped trying to retreat. The last one tried to run, but didn't make it past the flare before Ethan's third shot put him down like a dog. Silence returned, broken only by my shaking breath, the wind, and the soft, red glow of the flare still hissing on the dirt. We didn't celebrate. We didn't speak. Because we knew. This was just the beginning. The bodies were still warm when we started moving. We didn't take trophies, didn't strip them down for supplies, we weren't scavengers. But we searched them fast and thorough. These weren't street thugs. Their gear was clean, uniform. Their rifles were custom, modified for silence and speed. The kind of weapons you don't buy, you're issued. Ethan found a patch on one of the men's inner vest linings, a black circle with a snake eating its own tail. Ouroboros. Not a military symbol. Not even paramilitary. This was something darker. Older. A network with roots too deep to trace and teeth so sharp they could rip out entire lives without leaving a scar. They were contractors, Ethan muttered, standing over the man I'd shot. Not freelancers. These guys were activated. I crouched by another and found what I was hoping I wouldn't, a satellite phone, still warm from body heat, screen cracked but not shattered. I held it up. Last call made 7 minutes ago. Ethan looked at me and we both knew what that meant. These men weren't alone. They were forward scouts. Meant to secure the area, assess resistance, then report. And if this call went through, someone else, someone bigger, was already coming. This wasn't over. Not by a mile. We packed what we could, stashed the rest. Left the bodies under tarps, not out of mercy but necessity. The sun would do the rest by noon. We couldn't bury them. No time. No tools. And we didn't want the ground disturbed, not yet. Disturbed earth attracts eyes. Drones? Dogs? We needed to be ghosts again. Harder this time. More ruthless. Ethan didn't even look shaken. He moved like a man reliving a nightmare he'd rehearsed too many times to be scared anymore. I followed him out of the canyon, rifle in hand, my limbs still trembling even if I wouldn't admit it. Back at the cabin, we triggered the fail-safe, a homemade incendiary rig Ethan had installed under the floorboards the night we arrived. Crude but effective. One match was all it took. Within minutes, smoke poured through the cracks, the wood catching fast and greedy. Flames licked the roof by the time we were half a mile out. The cabin wouldn't survive the hour. And with it would go any sign we were ever there. We made it back to the Suburban. Still parked under the bluff where we left it. Still loaded with what little we had left, 2 go bags, a rusted jerry can, Ethan's notebook of contacts, and a single thumb drive, the one he said was everything. He never told me what was on it. Not yet. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he was waiting. Either way, I felt it in my gut. Whatever was coming next, that little piece of plastic would be the difference between death and survival. We were just about to drive when Ethan froze in place, eyes locked on the ridge behind us. I turned. And my stomach dropped. A black SUV. Sleek. Silent. Parked exactly where the canyon opened into the valley. Too clean for a local. Too out of place for coincidence. And standing next to it, arms folded across his chest like he'd been watching us the whole time, was a man in a beige suit and mirrored sunglasses. He wasn't armed. At least not visibly. But the way he stood calm, still, untouched by heat or blood or consequence, told me everything I needed to know. This was no scout. This was the man who gave the orders. The one who sent the list. And he was smiling. That smile? It was the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes. The kind that wasn't meant to soothe or charm, but to unnerve, like a predator playing polite before it sank its teeth into your throat. The man stood still, arms crossed, the desert wind teasing the edge of his suit jacket. It wasn't dusty, or wrinkled, or even weathered, just perfectly pressed and completely wrong for where we were. That, more than anything, told me who he was. Not just his identity, but his function. This wasn't a field agent. This was a messenger. A face. A carefully curated ghost in human skin. And he didn't need a gun to kill you. All he had to do was give the order. Ethan and I didn't move. Not at first. We stood by the truck, weapons still slung but fingers twitching. The SUV behind the man was running, engine humming like a panther ready to pounce. Tinted windows. No plates. Probably armored. And definitely not alone. There had to be others inside. Watching. Listening. Waiting. The man in the suit raised one hand, slow, deliberate, the way you gesture to a cornered animal. His smile didn't move. Michael. Ethan, he said, his voice smooth and clear despite the wind. No accent. No hesitation. Like he'd practiced our names for weeks. I was hoping we'd meet in a less dramatic fashion. No one spoke. I could feel Ethan vibrating next to me like a live wire. He didn't trust himself to speak, and I didn't blame him. One wrong move and this whole damn desert was going to explode. The man didn't wait for a reply. You've caused quite a bit of noise out here. I assume the men we sent didn't make it back. Still no answer. He took a step forward. Just one. Not enough to close distance. Just enough to remind us that he could. I'm not here to fight, he said. We could have ended this in Phoenix. We chose not to. That got me. My jaw clenched, but I held my ground. Why? I asked, voice flat. Why let it get this far? The man's smile widened slightly. Because I wanted to see what you'd do. How far you'd run. Who you'd protect. Who would protect you? He turned slightly, hands behind his back now, almost admiring the landscape. You're not on the list, Mike, because you were dangerous. You're on it because you were connected. You were leverage. A loose end. Ethan put you there. But I'm here to offer something else. I felt Ethan shift beside me, one foot sliding back in the dirt. His posture screamed, don't listen. But I had to hear it. I needed to know. The man continued. We're not interested in a manhunt. That's old business. Carter Vale's dead. The next generation doesn't want ghosts. It wants clean slates. Alex Vale isn't building a cartel. He's building something bigger. More refined. No guns in back alleys. No blood in the streets. He's building a network. He turned back toward us, sunglasses flashing red from the dying sun. And networks need compliance, not corpses. What are you offering? I asked, hating myself for how dry my throat felt. The man took a step closer. Erase the past. Give me the drive. Walk away. New names. New lives. No more running. No more bullets in the night. It sounded like peace. But it smelled like poison. And Ethan. Ethan didn't hesitate. He raised the rifle, locked the man in the crosshairs, and said just one word. No. The smile finally disappeared. And all hell broke loose. Time slowed in that moment, not like in movies where everything goes bullet time, but in that cold, sickening way your body feels right before a car crash. You see it coming. You know it's coming. And you're helpless to stop it. Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger, and I didn't even need to look. I could feel the decision in the way he squared his stance, in the way his shoulders set. He had no intention of bargaining. No illusions. He knew what this was. The man in the suit didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't dive for cover. He just took a breath, almost sad, like he'd expected this all along. And then Ethan fired. The shot hit dead center mass, not head. He wasn't trying to end it fast. He was sending a message. The man staggered back, a burst of red soaking his beige jacket, his body twisting sideways. But he didn't fall. Not right away. He stumbled, caught himself on the SUV's fender, looked at the blood on his hand like it was some kind of surprise. Then the doors of the SUV flew open. Two men jumped out, tactical gear, automatic weapons, no hesitation. Another climbed from the driver's seat, pulling something long and heavy from a case in the back. I didn't wait to see what it was. I grabbed Ethan's arm and yanked him behind the Suburban just as the air erupted in a storm of gunfire. Bullets ripped through the dirt around us, kicking up clouds of dust and shrapnel. I hit the ground hard, my shoulders slamming into rock. But I didn't let go of the rifle I'd taken from the canyon. I rolled, came up crouched, and fired 3 blind shots around the bumper. Ethan was already laying suppressive fire over the hood, shouting something I couldn't make out. His voice lost in the roar of the automatic rounds tearing the air apart. We were outgunned, outpositioned, and 1 second away from being torn to pieces. But we had one advantage. Desperation. Ethan turned to me, blood running down his temple from a nick above his eye. The ravine, he shouted. 15 yards east. We get there. We can circle back and lose them in the rocks. I nodded once. No time for questions. Just movement. We sprinted, weaving through the hailstorm of lead. Keeping low, every step a gamble. I felt one bullet whistle past my ear. So close I swore I heard it think. Another grazed my thigh, hot and sharp, but shallow. Nothing fatal. Not yet. We dove into the ravine just as one of the men lobbed a grenade past the truck. The blast hit like a hammer, the shockwave folding my ears and driving the breath from my lungs. We didn't look back. Didn't dare. The ravine narrowed fast, the walls hugging tight, blocking sight lines and muffling sound. It was steep and dry, a natural trench carved from centuries of wind and time. Ethan led the way, limping now, but moving like a man who knew every stone by heart. I followed, one hand pressed to my thigh, the other gripping the rifle so tight it left grooves in my palm. Behind us, the gunfire slowed, then stopped. They weren't chasing. Not yet, which meant they were planning. We found a break in the ravine wall, a small, sunken hollow covered in brush. We ducked inside and collapsed, both of us gasping, coated in blood and dirt, the air thick with heat and adrenaline. Ethan reached into his vest, pulled out the thumb drive, and stared at it like it was a ticking bomb. "They want this," he said. "Not us. This." I nodded slowly. "Then we give it to them," I said. His eyes widened, confused, until I added, "But not the way they expect." The plan wasn't brilliant. It wasn't elegant or cinematic. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd see in some slick espionage movie with British accents and laser grids. But it was real. It was ours. And more importantly, it was desperate. The kind of move only men backed into a corner would think of. I pulled my pack in close, unzipped the front pocket, and dug out the last piece of tech I owned that hadn't been compromised. An ancient burner laptop, black tape covering every brand, antenna cracked, battery nearly gone. But it still worked. And more importantly, it still had access to the darknet tunnels Ethan had showed me back when all of this was still theory, back when we still thought we had time. The thumb drive was slick with blood when Ethan handed it over. He didn't say a word, just looked at me like this might be the last time he handed anything to anyone. I wiped it off on my sleeve and slid it into the port. The screen came alive in dim green light, humming low like it knew what was coming. I clicked into the drive. A single folder, no label. Inside files. Hundreds. Documents, audio clips, photos. Some were corrupted. Others locked. But a few opened. And what I saw was enough to make my stomach turn. Video footage. Torture rooms. Secret handshakes with men in uniforms. Transcripts of meetings that were never supposed to exist. Politicians. CEOs. Names that could crack entire governments like eggshells. And at the center of every thread, like a spider perfectly still in its web, was Alex Vale. No longer just the son of a myth. No longer a whisper in the underground. This man had become a machine, a system of silence and shadow, controlling not just drugs or weapons but information, leverage, data, truth itself. "I knew it was big," Ethan said, voice barely audible. "But not this big. They kill for less," I murmured, still scrolling. "Hell, they start wars for less." He leaned in. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I nodded. We turned the drive into a weapon. Not a bargaining chip. Not a ticket out. A detonation. There was only one way to do it: scatter the data. Break it into 1,000 encrypted pieces and send each fragment across the globe using burner networks, torrenting hubs, whistleblower dead drops. We couldn't just dump it. It would be traced, corrupted, buried. But if we split it wide enough, loud enough, the truth would spread faster than they could contain it. And even if they found us, even if they put us in the ground and paved over the grave, what we started wouldn't die. I set to work. Ethan watched the canyon mouth, rifle across his lap, sweat dripping from his jaw. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He knew time was ticking. I knew the signal strength would be weak this far out. But the connection was there, a thin lifeline through a satellite node we'd hacked the year before. I launched the upload. Watched the progress bar move like molasses. 1%. Then 2. Every second was a lifetime. "I never wanted this," Ethan said after a while. "I just wanted to disappear." "You did," I said, "I still on the screen. Problem is the truth followed you." 10%. 12. Then something buzzed. A sound low and electronic. The phone. The satellite link. A message had come through. One line. 4 words. "You made your choice." We looked at each other. No more time. I reached into the pack, pulled out the second flare, this one bright white, a signal we'd set years ago. A failsafe. I lit it and fired it straight into the sky. A beacon. Not just to them, but to everyone. The flare rose fast, screaming silently through the dark like a dying star, and when it burst into blinding white above the canyon, the entire valley lit up like noon. There was nothing subtle about it. Nothing discreet. That flare was a declaration. A challenge. A final, defiant middle finger to the men who had hunted us through silence and shadow for 3 decades. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt power shift. Not completely. Not enough to win. But enough to rattle them. Enough to make the machine hesitate. Ethan stood there beneath the glowing sky, his silhouette stark against the rocks, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the horizon like he was waiting for an old ghost to finally show its face. His jaw was tight, body wound like wire. But he wasn't scared. Not anymore. He was ready. And as I crouched by the laptop watching the upload inch past 30%, I realized something else, so was I. The message wasn't just symbolic. It was functional. Embedded in the flare's frequency was a digital ping, a pre-coded beacon that would alert 5 separate drop points in the system Ethan had built years ago, scattered dark web tunnels, burner inboxes. Leak platforms too obscure for the Veil network to choke off quickly. If even one of them activated, the files would spread, replicate, echo through the web like a virus. And once the truth was out, it wouldn't go back in the box. But the response came faster than we expected. From the far end of the valley, dust. A low, rising cloud, maybe 2 miles off. Lights flickering in the haze. Not from the sun. Not from flares. From headlights. Ethan saw them first. They sent the convoy. How many? I asked, not looking up from the screen. 3. Maybe 4 SUVs. Fast. Big engines. They'll be here in minutes. 42%. 43. He turned to me. You've got until they hit 50 yards. After that, we break them apart. I didn't respond. My fingers flew over the keys. Encrypt. Fragment. Recode. Reroute. The laptop was burning hot now, the old fan whining like it was about to die. The upload bar blinked, stuttered, then kept crawling forward. The wind picked up. The flare began to fizzle out, its light growing dimmer, but not gone. And as the dust cloud grew closer, I could hear it, the engines. Growling. Angry. And underneath that, something sharper. A metallic clatter. Drones? They were serious now. No more warnings. No more suits and negotiations. This was a kill mission. They'd given us a chance to disappear, and we spat it back in their faces. They were coming to erase us. Ethan dropped to a knee, unzipped a secondary pouch on his vest, and pulled out a remote detonator, small, square, wired to plastic. He caught my eye, and I knew exactly what it was. Fallback? I asked. Only if it gets ugly? It's already ugly. He smiled. Just a twitch. Then we go out in style. The roar of the engines was louder now. The first SUV broke through the ridge line, black as night, armored plates, tires thick enough to crush bone. Another followed, then a third. They fanned out in formation, forming a crescent aimed straight for us. I could see faces now. Helmets. Visors. Gloved hands on weapons. Ethan stood tall. 57%. I reached for the last flare red again. No signal this time. Just distraction. I struck it and tossed it high, and as the valley lit red once more, Ethan took the first shot. A clean one. Through the windshield. Straight into the driver's skull. The SUV swerved, clipped a rock, flipped once, and burst into flame. The war had begun. And we were both already on fire. The explosion cracked the night open like thunder splitting the heavens. Flames shot 20 feet into the air, bathing the rocks in a sick, flickering orange, and for a heartbeat, the entire canyon glowed like the mouth of hell had opened beneath our feet. The flipped SUV burned like it had been waiting for this fuel-feeding fire, fire-feeding panic. One of the attackers was crawling from the wreckage, body engulfed in flame, but there were no screams. Just the horrible, muffled sounds of synthetic gear melting into skin. It should have made me sick. But it didn't. I was too far past shock. Too deep into survival. The other 2 SUVs didn't stop. If anything, the explosion made them faster, like rage had replaced caution. The first tore left, the second right, fanning out like wolves cutting angles on prey. Ethan dropped flat, reloaded, and hit the dirt running. He disappeared behind a boulder and began picking shots, sharp, controlled bursts that pinged off steel and shattered windows. But they didn't slow down. I was still crouched over the laptop, sweat pouring down my face, eyes locked on the upload bar like it was a lifeline. 72%. Come on. Come on. The hum in the sky grew louder. Drones, 2 of them, small but deadly. Armed. Their rotors buzzed like wasps and their lights cut sweeping arcs across the canyon. They weren't just here to spot. They were here to end. One of them dipped low, almost curious, scanning the rocks. I yanked the laptop cord free, shoved it and the drive into my pack, and rolled backward just as the drone locked onto my last position and opened fire. Bullets tore through the rock, ripping stone into dust. I hit the ground hard, coughing, my ribs on fire. But the pack was still with me. The files still intact. Ethan shouted something, I didn't hear it. Another explosion. This time not ours. One of the SUVs had launched a canister. Smoke, thick and oily, poured into the canyon like a living thing. It rolled over rock, swallowed shadow, blinded us. But they could see through it. Infrared. Tech we didn't have. Ethan reappeared beside me, dragging a duffel. We've got maybe 60 seconds, he growled. You ready? 81%, I answered, voice cracking. That's enough, he said. It has to be. I nodded, throat dry. Then we make sure it finishes after we're gone. I reached into the pack and pulled out the final device, a pulse drive Ethan had built out of scavenged parts. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't military grade. But it was genius. Once activated, it would bounce the remaining upload between every open signal it could find, hopping nodes, rerouting data through thousands of ghost servers. Even if we were cut off, even if we died, the upload would complete. I hit the switch. A soft beep. Green light. Irreversible. We looked at each other, and for a long second, there was no war, no fear, no 30 years of silence. Just two men. Tired. Bleeding. Still standing. Then Ethan whispered, go. We ran. Into the canyon's throat, into blackness. Behind us, gunfire chased our heels, screamingly chewing into stone. A bullet nicked my shoulder. Another cracked into Ethan's calf. He stumbled. I grabbed him. Pulled. We didn't stop. Not until we reached the fallback point, a narrow chute Ethan had rigged with plastic explosives days ago. He collapsed behind the switch, face pale, hands shaking. Now, he asked. I looked back. They were coming. Hard. Fast. 10 men, no hesitation. Now, I said. He hit the trigger. And the canyon collapsed. The explosion didn't sound like in the movies. There was no sharp boom followed by silence. No dramatic fireball neatly rising into the sky. It was worse. It was deeper. It shook the earth like something ancient had been awakened, like the bones of the canyon itself were screaming. The rock gave way all at once, a violent collapse that swallowed everything behind us. I turned in time to see the dust cloud hit, thick and gray and fast as floodwater. It rolled toward us with the force of a hurricane, and in seconds we were buried in the choking dark. I remember the taste first. Grit. Salt. Blood. Then the weight, not of stone, but of silence. A silence so deep, so absolute, it pressed against my chest like hands trying to squeeze the air from my lungs. We lay there beneath the overhang Ethan had led us to, a sliver of safety tucked into the rock wall, barely wide enough to shield two bodies. He was half conscious, his leg a mess of torn fabric and blood. I reached for him, felt a pulse. Weak. But there. We're alive, I whispered, more to myself than him. The dust didn't settle for a long time. When it finally thinned, the landscape behind us was gone. The ravine gone. The SUVs, the soldiers, the man in the beige suit, gone. All of it buried beneath tons of collapsed earth and burning wreckage. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like aftermath. Like standing in the crater after a bomb has gone off and realizing you're still breathing. I pulled the laptop from my pack, hands trembling. The screen was cracked. The casing melted on one side. But it powered on. And the upload bar, that beautiful, stubborn little bar, had reached 100%. It was done. The files were out there now, bleeding through servers like a virus too smart to kill. Even if they found the source, even if they traced the signature, it would be too late. The truth had detonated. Not in one place. Everywhere. I leaned back against the rock, shoulders sagging, and laughed, a broken, breathless sound that startled the quiet. I didn't even know I could laugh anymore. But something inside me cracked open. Relief. Exhaustion. Something wild and primal that sounded like survival. Ethan stirred beside me. His face was pale, lips dry, but he smiled. You did it. We did it, I said. He nodded slowly. Good. He closed his eyes, not in death, but in something close to peace. A kind of peace neither of us had earned, but maybe, just maybe, we had stolen. We stayed hidden for hours. Until the stars came out. Until the smoke cleared and the desert went silent again, pretending it hadn't just witnessed a war. Then we moved. Slow. Careful. Wounded. But alive. By dawn, we were miles away. Limbs aching. Spirits shredded. But free. And behind us, in that lost valley, the truth smoldered beneath the ash. Waiting to be found by the world it was about to change forever. We walked until our legs gave out. Then we crawled. Then we simply lay under the cover of some ragged brush near the edge of a highway we didn't recognize, watching dust devils dance across the asphalt like spirits sent to mock the dead. Every step we took away from that canyon felt unreal, like we weren't survivors but shadows of something that had already burned to the ground. Ethan was limping, face sunken and pale, but he didn't complain. I think something inside him had gone quiet forever. Not broken. Just spent. All that fight, all that guilt, poured out in those final hours back there. And now he was hollowed out, still breathing, but no longer hiding. Eventually, a truck stopped for us. Old farmer didn't ask questions. Just saw two men covered in blood and dust and gave us water and a blanket. Dropped us off 3 towns over without ever once looking us in the eye. Maybe he saw something he didn't want to understand. Or maybe he knew better than to get involved. Out here, the desert teaches you things. Like how to tell ghosts from men. We made it to a motel, the kind with flickering vacancy signs and roaches hiding behind the vending machines. It was perfect. No cameras. No questions. Just a bed and a door that locked. I ran the water until it turned clear, and when Ethan finally collapsed into the sheets, he didn't move for 13 hours. I sat by the window with the shotgun across my lap and watched the road. Every car that passed made my breath catch. Every shadow made my fingers twitch. But no one came. No SUVs. No drones. No men in beige suits. Not anymore. The next morning, the internet exploded. I saw it on the lobby TV. Some local news anchor in LA talking about a data breach of unprecedented scope. Buzzwords. Panic. Then came the leaks. Names. Faces. Videos. Documents. Headlines screaming about secret networks, missing people, buried crimes. It was bigger than we thought. Carter Vale wasn't just running an empire, he'd infected governments, rewritten laws, controlled narratives. Alex had taken it further. He'd made the entire world complicit. But not anymore. Now the world knew. And it couldn't unknow it. By noon, 3 senators had resigned. By nightfall, a CEO committed suicide. By the next week, half a dozen arrests. Whistleblowers began crawling out of the woodwork, validating every bite of data we'd spilled. We'd broken the dam. The flood was coming. And Ethan? He didn't want to stay. We had one last drink together in that motel room. Cheap whiskey. No toasts. No goodbyes. Just silence. He looked at me, eyes calm for the first time in 30 years, and said, "I think I'm done running." I nodded. "You earned that. I think I'll go north. Mountains. Off-grid. Real this time." He paused, then added, "You." I smiled. "I think I'll stay right here and watch the bastards drown." He chuckled. It was soft. Tired. But real. And then he left. No hugs. No promises. Just 2 men who'd already said everything in the fire. I never saw him again. But sometimes when the air's still and the news flickers with another fall from grace, I swear I hear his voice, low, dry, amused. We didn't save the world. We just reminded it that it was dirty. And some names don't belong in history books. They belong in the dirt.